So welcome to tonight's Spring Observer Training. We're going to talk about how to be a backyard observer and how to document seasonal changes. We're going to cover a lot of ground, but there will be plenty of time at the end for questions. And so as we're going along, feel free to drop any questions in the chat and we'll make sure we get back to them. So I love this quote from Aldo Leopold: "Keeping records enhances the pleasure of the search." I'm sure you are just like me and you enjoy nature, whether that's birds that are your favorite, insects, whatever. My favorite are the plants. And I know that when I am keeping track of when I see things occurring, that it just really enhances my experience. So to tell you a little bit about myself, I've always enjoyed watching the seasons. I've always been a plant person. From the time I was very little, I've had a garden and loved flowers. But then I moved halfway across the country to a brand new place, different climate, and I was so curious as to how things were going to be different from what I'd grown up with. So I tried keeping records. I tried writing down, when I saw things, and then I'd do great at the very beginning of spring, and then things would start speeding up and life would happen. And I just wasn't very as effective as I would really like to be. And then I learned about this awesome tool that I'm going to tell you about tonight called Nature's Notebook. And it solved all of my challenges at keeping track of records. And the even more awesome thing was that the records that I collected, the data that I collected, helped scientists. And so I was just hooked. And so much so that I started Indiana Phenology to get other people to join me in documenting seasonal changes using this and other platforms. So tonight, we'll really dig into how to use the platforms, what to observe, but we're going to start off with an introduction to phenology so that we just have some background information. We're all on the same page as to what phenology is, why it matters, and how we might want to observe it. If you have come to some of my other programs, a lot of this stuff we cover in other programs as well, because I really think it's foundational and important that we understand all of this. So let's jump right in. So phenology, let's give it a definition. It's really focused on the recurring life cycle events in plants and animals, anything living. In plants, we're talking about things like leafing and flowering, the ripening of crops in the fields, emergence of insects, migration of birds, all of that's phenology. I like to call it the science of the seasons, and it's the study of the seasonal cyclical changes known as phenophases, as well as their timing and relationships with weather and climate. So it's really literally happening everywhere right now. No matter where you go, what time of year it is, there are these seasonal cyclical life cycle events that are occurring in succession around the globe. And it's happening all the time. Like I said, spring, summer, fall, winter, whether you're in a place that has a distinct spring, summer, fall, and winter or not, it's happening all of the time. Phenology is really a key feature of life on Earth. And the different species are interrelated according to their phenology. So many birds time their nesting so that their eggs hatch when insects are available to feed their nestlings. In turn, that insect emergence is synchronized with the leaf out in the host plants. For people, we even have some synchrony with the phenology of other species. Our allergy season right now, in fact, starts when particular flowers are blooming. If we have earlier flowering one year, it means earlier allergies. Farmers and gardeners, obviously, they have a very good feel and understanding of phenology. They need to know when to plant to avoid frost. They need to know the schedule of plant and insect development so that they can take various different management activities. So many of us in our current society, especially urban office dwellers, don't have as close of a connection to nature in our everyday lives. But people of the past were far more in tune with nature than we are today because they really had to be. obviously paying careful attention to your surroundings can mean the difference between survival and death. But even though we are a little bit disconnected in our lives from nature, nature and phenology really do have just as an important role to play in our lives and our survival as they ever have. To look at phenology in a very people-centric way, phenology really affects all sorts of different things that are part of our lives. So phenology can play a role in our health. I already mentioned allergies and the connection with plant phenology. Pest-borne diseases also have a phenological component. If you think about mosquitoes, the time of day and the time of year that they're most active, that's when we are going to be at the most risk from pest-borne, mosquito-borne diseases. That's phenology. The timing of different plant and animal activities impacts different recreation opportunities at different points in the year. It affects required conservation activities or potential risks and hazards that we may encounter. Really, phenology affects not only us in various different ways, but it affects all aspects of our environment, including the abundance and diversity of organisms, their interactions with one another, their functions in the food web, their seasonal behavior. And on a global scale, phenology impacts the cycles of water, carbon, and other chemical elements. So it's really foundational and important. It is also an indicator of environmental change of all types, particularly right now. It's important for climate change science because changes in phenological events, for instance, flowering or bird migrations, are among the most sensitive biological responses to climate change. The weather and what happens from day to day in the immediate environmental conditions around an organism are a big part of what cue them to move from one life cycle stage to the next. So across the world, we're seeing many spring events occurring earlier and fall events happening later than they did in the past. And how plants and animals are responding to their changing climate can help us predict whether their populations will grow or shrink, and how our environment is going to change and the interactions are going to change as a result. So I mentioned changes due to climate change, shifts in spring phenology. If we look at what scientists have been studying and seeing, on average, they're seeing that spring events are starting 2 days earlier per decade than they did in the past. And this goes back very far in the past in some instances. And we're seeing this trend toward earlier spring in events in 62% of species studied. So more than half of the species studied, but not everything is shifting. So what spring events are we talking about here? We're talking about things like trees getting their leaves earlier, earlier flowering, earlier migration, earlier breeding of birds and amphibians, earlier emergence from hibernation. But in short, many different species are responding to changing climate by starting their spring activities earlier than they did 100 years ago or even 10 years ago. But not all species and regions are changing at the same rate, which is problematic. So let's look into why that might be a problem. So let's tell a story. We have 3 characters here. They each have different basic needs and different aspects of their environment that drive their phenology, that cue them as to when to do something different or to shift into a different phenophase, as we term it. So we have here a lovely oak tree, a big stately oak tree that is home to this migratory bird and also to this little caterpillar that becomes a moth. And each of these 3 species are interrelated. So the oak tree houses the bird and the caterpillar. The bird feeds its young on the caterpillar, and the caterpillar would really rather not be dinner. And so it does its best to avoid the beak of the bird and to make it through to its next stage when it is a moth and is safe from being dinner for the bird. So if we look at it on a graph, kind of a timeline here, this is how the story goes with this migratory bird It's cued in its wintering grounds to leave, to migrate to its breeding grounds. It arrives, it lays its eggs, and when everything is all in sync, those eggs hatch just at the peak abundance of the caterpillars. So there are enough caterpillars to feed all of those nestlings. They're all happy and they survive. There are also enough caterpillars to survive on and move to the next stage so that they can be around for the next year. But we are seeing this change. So responding to earlier springs, the caterpillars are emerging earlier. The migratory birds, however, are continuing to rely on the conditions in their wintering grounds to cue their migration, which results in a phenological mismatch where those birds arrive, they lay their eggs, their nestlings hatch, but the caterpillars have already come and gone, and there's not enough food for the nestlings. And in areas where these birds are becoming mismatched with their food source like this, we can see declines of up to 90% in the bird populations. And the earlier the emergence of the moths, the caterpillars, the greater the decline we're seeing in bird population. And scientists who have studied this, these 9 songbirds right here are 9 ones that they have seen to, you could say, be unable to keep up with the shifting in spring temperatures. And so their nesting is no longer timed to coincide with the peak in nestling food sources. And as a consequence, there is a decline in the populations of these birds. So that's just one example of how changing climates leads to changing phenology, and how when species don't change in the same way because they're cued to make their changes by different things in their environment, species can get out of sync with each other, and it can have negative consequences. So scientists don't have the time or resources to study every species in every location. And some areas of study are more interesting to scientists than others, or there's more money and resources available to those. So that's where citizen science can come in and help us understand what's happening in all of those other species that scientists aren't studying, or in those locations where scientists aren't focused. So citizen science is scientific research conducted in whole or in part by people who are not paid to be scientists. They could be amateurs, non-professional scientists, retired scientists, anyone who is not a professional scientist and is doing science is a citizen scientist. It's also known by other names. Some people call it crowdsourced science, volunteer monitoring, participatory research, community science, all sorts of different terms. The concept or the term itself is relatively new. It was entered into the Oxford English Dictionary in 2014, so that wasn't that long ago. But really, as humans, we've been experimenting with food, medicines. We've been studying the sky, collecting butterflies for eons. Doing science is something that's just innate in humanity. So there is always the question of, can amateurs do as good a job as the paid professional scientists? And scientists have studied this. The authors of one research study estimated, the authors of one research study determined that the quality of data collected by the volunteers was generally as reliable as the data collected by professionals, particularly when those volunteers have been well trained. And citizen science and the contribution of volunteers and citizen scientists is really invaluable to science. So one author of a research study estimated that volunteers contribute over $2.5 billion worth of labor annually to biodiversity research, which is a significant amount of money and a significant contribution. So because of all of this, citizen science is becoming increasingly prevalent in scientific peer-reviewed literature. And there are a number of publications, the number is increasing year by year, that feature data by citizen scientists. So why am I telling you about citizen science? Well, Indiana Phenology is a citizen science organization. We engage volunteers of all ages in documenting the timing of phenology in Indiana so that we can understand how our environment here in Indiana is changing and how the species here are reacting to those changes. We're working to gather baseline information related to leafing, flowering, and fruiting of common native plants in all 92 counties so that we can have local relevant data sets on the places that we know and love and want to protect, because there is the Midwest and Indiana is not the most exciting location for scientists to study, but our environment is super important and valuable and worthwhile study, particular for us. And so that's what Indiana Phenology is all about. So we really believe in the inherent value of knowledge and the power of education as an agent for change and the capacity of everyone for learning. So we are engaging all Hoosiers, no matter their age, young or old, their race, background, whatever. We're engaging them in documenting phenology, seasonal changes. We believe that it's not only does it give us this awesome data set, but it's also a great way to engage with nature, and it's accessible to everyone. So we facilitate citizen science phenology observation programs, we deliver environmental education programming, and then we collaborate with community partners. And through this, we work with individuals and groups and schools. So we have 3 parallel programs that differ on who our audience is or who our volunteers are in those programs. And so we have our Indiana Backyard Observers program. That's for individuals, families who want to observe on their own on private lands or nearby natural areas. We have a phenology trail program where we partner with nature centers, nature preserves, parks, similar organizations that have some sort of property, and we help them set up and maintain phenology observation sites on their property in support of their education management and research goals. And then we have our Indiana Schoolyard Phenology program where we work with teachers to help them engage their students in studying phenology and biodiversity on their school grounds to support classroom learning. So we've been collecting data for about 5 years now, and we're just beginning to be able to explore trends over time. And I'm really excited about some of the work we're going to be doing along that vein in the future, so stay tuned there. Our coverage varies from month to month, but in a typical month, we have active observers in 20 to 30 counties around Indiana. On this map here, the lighter counties are ones that are new compared to previous years. And you can really see every colored county is one in which that we have some phenology data from the past 5 years on it. Ultimately, we hope to have multiple observers participating in every county of Indiana, documenting the timing of seasonal changes. Right now, we're focusing our education efforts on common native plants, but common non-native plants, invasive species, and even less common plants are all part of the picture and are all something that we are interested in having data collected on. Same goes for birds, insects, amphibians, and so forth. We're interested in all of that. So what data are we collecting? Phenology status data. So that means for plants and animals, we're looking at life cycle events that have an observable beginning and ending point. We call those phenophases. So for animals, at the most basic level, we're looking at what it's doing, its activity, its reproductive behaviors, and its stages of development, and when those different things are occurring. And for plants, the focus is on the leaves and the flowers and fruits of the life cycle. So one of our goals is to be able to compare the timing of different events from one year to the next, or to compare the timing in different parts of the state, to be able to identify and examine trends of change. And just imagine how cool it would be to have a website you could visit where you could explore this data. That's what we're working for, and what you'll see in the future. But just to take a moment to look at some of what we've collected already. This has been collected by our Phenology Trail volunteers, and a little bit about what we're learning about it. Let let me go back to this slide right here. So this is called a phenology calendar, and it's essentially a timeline. It goes from January to December, and each of those colored bars there represents a data point, a visit where someone went out and observed something and collected some data. So the green bars indicate that they saw something occurring. In this case, we're looking at American beech leaves, whether there were some on the tree or not, for 2 different years, 2015 and 2016 on the bottom. So the green is a yes, there were leaves. A gray bar is a no, there weren't leaves that day. And if you don't see a bar, then there's no data. Nobody went out and reported anything. So you can see really quickly right here visually that there were different trends between these 2 different years. There were different points in time in which there were leaves on the tree. And so this right here is a way of comparing 2 different years. So on the left, we have some data from 2020 of eastern redbud, which is blooming right now where I am in Indiana. And at the top, we've got the green. This shows the yes when we saw leaves on the eastern redbud. The middle shows, again, we're still looking at that left graph. The middle shows the flowers when we saw flowers on the eastern redbud, and on the bottom is when we saw fruits. And you can see that March to April was when we first started to see the flowers or flower buds on the tree. And we are in middle of April and right in the middle of the flowers right now where we are. On the right, we are just looking at the flowers line. And so we've got 3 years here. We've got 2021, 2020, and 2019. And there's a bar right at the beginning of April. And so what you can see right off is between these 3 different years, there was a different starting point and a different spread for the period of flowering on eastern redbud, which is interesting. You can also use phenology calendars on our data to compare different species. Just to briefly look at this, we've got Virginia bluebells, something that again is active right now, and early spring ephemeral. And then on the right, we've got a summer bloomer, common milkweed. And by looking at the different spread of the bars, you can see that these 2 species occupy a different ecological niche. The first one, our spring ephemeral, it begins, ends, it's done with everything, its whole life cycle. In pretty short order, by June, it's gone dormant and is no longer there. Whereas common milkweed is very different. It doesn't even get started until in May and starts flowering in June, long after the Virginia bluebells are gone. So the data can help us understand life cycles like this. It's very interesting. And I could talk about it all night long, but we're going to move on to what you're here to learn about tonight, which is how to observe and record phenology. We've covered what it is, why it matters, and some interesting things about it. But now we're going to shift into how you make these observations and how you can share them. So as a backyard observer, not only will you learn a lot about what you observe and become intimately familiar with the species and individuals that you observe, but you're also going to be helping scientists in Indiana and around the world to better understand our ecosystems, how they function and how they're changing. And you'll also be contributing to the creation of that amazing public resource about nature and the environment here in Indiana that we're hoping to create with our data set. So it's really easy to be a backyard observer, really. Basically, you go outside, you look around, and you share what you see. We use 2 different platforms or free tools. One is Nature's Notebook, and the other is iNaturalist. These 2 platforms are geared toward collecting different types of data, and we'll talk about each of them briefly. So Nature's Notebook is a project of the USA National Phenology Network. It's designed to provide a user-friendly platform for collecting observations in the field, and it's used by citizen and professional scientists across the country. All observations become part of a national database. There are over 1,200 species of plants and animals that you can monitor using Nature's Notebook and their phenology monitoring protocols. It has a free app It also has a web-based interface. I like the app. I suggest that you use the app, but it's good to know that you have the option if you are the type of person that wants to keep track of things on paper and then enter them in after the fact. One other thing about Nature's Notebook is that it's designed for you to observe the same individual plants or animals in the same area repeatedly over time. So you go back to the same place and observe the same things so that you get really good time series data, what's happening from one season to the next. iNaturalist, on the other hand, is more focused on collecting, more focused on incidental sightings of phenology. You don't have to commit to returning to the same individual over time or the same location. Some people like to think of iNaturalist as an online social network of people sharing biodiversity information to help each other learn about nature. So it has a different focus. You don't have to go back to the same things. But one thing that is really great about iNaturalist is that it's very visual. You can share photographic evidence, photos of what you see, whereas with Nature's Notebook, there is no way to provide a photo. So you can use the two in conjunction with each other, and or you can pick one or the other. Another really important thing to note here about being a backyard observer is that really anyone can do this. These are two of my really cute kids some years ago. And my daughter here, when she was 4, she was really one of my best phenology observation buddies. She could answer the questions, she could collect data just as accurately as I could over time. So it's easy. Even preschool age children can participate. Like I said, we work with schools, community organizations, families, nature centers, anyone who wants to help. It's very accessible activity. And no special skills are required. Anyone can develop the skills and expertise that they'll need over the course of their time making observations. The only thing that you need is an interest in closely observing nature and learning more, having an open mind. So right here, really the only thing you have to be able to do is be able to recognize that each of these 4 different pictures here is showing you something different happening on the plant. So in this case, this is common milkweed. On the left, we have those flower buds. Next, we have those open flowers. Then we have those really awesome looking seed pods developing fruits. And then in the last picture there, we have the ripe fruits, the seeds that are fluffy and off they're going. If you can recognize that each of those are something different happening on the plant, that's it. You are ready to go. You've got what it takes to be a backyard observer. And by the end of this presentation, you will be equipped with all of the tools and knowledge about the platforms that you'll need to participate. So let's talk about how we record phenology using Nature's Notebook. So as I mentioned before, it's a user-friendly platform. This is really the tool that made the difference between success and failure for me at documenting when things were happening. And I love it. I can't express how exciting Nature's Notebook is as a tool to me. So it's a tool that's managed by the USA National Phenology Network. They provide this tool, but we utilize their tool to support our programs. They have over, I think, 13 million records in their database that have been collected nationwide at more than 10,000 sites by more than 11,000 observers. So it's focused on seasonal and long-term changes in plants and animals. These changes are studied by observing the same individual through the seasons from year to year. And unlike iNaturalist and other citizen science opportunities that focus on just incidental one-time sightings of things, or single points in time like a BioBlitz for many different species, Nature's Notebook has that time series, that across time, that status data. So we can look at the data and we can say, on this day it did this thing, on this day it wasn't doing this thing. We've got a really complete picture of what's happening at a site and how it changes. And there is also the ability to optionally answer a question on how much or how many you're seeing something happening, that abundance data. So you can get the type of data that's on the bottom here, where you can see the peaks and troughs. So Nature's Notebook observers collect data using scientifically vetted standardized protocols for each of the plant or animal species that they observe using Nature's Notebook. Essentially, a protocol is a list of the phenophases and questions about them that ask about the phenological activity occurring on an individual plant or observed in an animal species. And each of those phenophases is defined in detail with species-specific information so that how you answer that question, do you see something on a plant, would be answered the same way by any other observer. So it's not really complicated, but the protocol helps us be consistent and answer the questions in the same way over time. So observers can enter their data with traditional paper data sheets. You can go online and you can print those out and then enter your data in after the fact through the web browser, or you can skip the paper data sheets and then just enter your observations directly into the mobile app while you're standing in front of the plant. I think that is the most efficient way, quickest way, easiest way to do it, but either way is available to you. And we'll talk a little bit about how you access both of those. So the data is freely available for anyone to look at. They have some really awesome visualization tools through Nature's Notebook and their platform. Excuse me. We also offer some tools to assist observers and researchers in understanding the data that they've collected. So what do you have to do to get started? There are 3 easy steps. First, you have to join Nature's Notebook. You have to create an account. Then you decide what you're going to observe and where, and register your observation site. Essentially tell Nature's Notebook where and what, so that it can prompt you to answer the right questions, and then you go ahead and start observing. You only have to do these initial setup steps once, and then you're to the observing part, and that part is pretty straightforward and easy. So you can either join Nature's Notebook online through their web interface, or you can through the app. If you are going to join through the web, you go to Nature's Notebook. You can Google that and you can find the website pretty quick and easy. You click on Join Nature's Notebook, you put in an email address, and you're good to go. Alternatively, you can download the app and you can open it up, and then you can click on Join Nature's Notebook and go through that same process, and then you're good to go. The second step, once you're in Nature's Notebook, you want to join our Indiana Backyard Observers group. That just connects you up with us in the app so that we can communicate with each other, and that when we download the data, your data is pooled in with ours. You can do that in the app or through the web browser. Same theme here, and you join. You can find search for us and then click that button that you want to join. If you forget when you register, you can always go back and do it later on. So the second step, and this is the step that takes the most time and thought, but we'll walk you through all of it. That's creating and registering your observation site. So you get to select your location where you're going to observe. You get to select any plants you want to observe, pick the animal species, and then input all that information in Nature's Notebook. So some tips for choosing a site: you want to pick somewhere that's convenient. If you have to choose convenience versus having an exciting location. You want some place that you go often, some place that you're interested in studying more, some place that you have a connection to, because you're going to be more likely to collect data if it's a place that you go to more often. Like I said, we're interested in data for all of Indiana for a variety of species. So pretty much anywhere you pick is going to be valuable and useful data for us. A second consideration on where to observe is the appropriate size. There is a maximum size for an observation site. It is approximately 15 acres, the size of a square. That's 2.5 football fields in length. So you can see here just kind of a visual. I've superimposed 2.5 football fields over a couple of different locations on this map. You can see in elementary schools, approximately it's 15 acres, an agricultural field, a suburban neighborhood. Those are all the maximum sizes. But a side note here, there is no minimum size. So you can have an observation site that is as small as the area around a single plant. And you can have as many observation sites as you want. Another consideration is that you want the conditions across the site that you select to be relatively uniform. So if you want to observe in a grassy area and in a woodland that are right next to each other, you can just make those two separate sites and observe there. But the point of having uniform conditions across the site is that it helps the scientists that are studying your data. When you set it up, you give some information about your site, and you want that information to be consistent across all of the things that you're going to be observing. All right, so once you decided where you're going to observe, you get to select what you're going to observe. So some tips here, you need to pick a species that, let me try again. You need to pick something that you know its species. So if there is a plant that you're really excited about observing, you're going to have to put in a little bit of effort to figure out what it is. I am happy to look at pictures or to talk you through how you might figure out what the species is of something you're interested in observing, but you have to know its species. It also has to be on the Nature's Notebook species list. Remember, I said there are more than 1,000 different species that are on the list. So most of the common plants that you're going to interact with are likely on that species list. It also has to be interesting to you, and it doesn't matter if it's wild or cultivated. Either is fine. Here is a list of some plants that we have a lot of other observers that are already sharing data on. So this is a good starting place if you just have no idea what you want to observe. Find yourself an oak, a hickory, a maple, a black walnut, or a tulip tree, maybe a serviceberry, goldenrod, milkweed, redbud, or coneflower. And most of us are likely to be able to find one of those close by us. But again, this is open to what you are interested in. We want as much data as we possibly can get. So whatever you're interested in, we're interested in it too. You might want to start with 2 to 3 different species. You could have 4 to 6 plants total. That's a good starting amount of plants. It takes about 2 to 5 minutes per plant to make all the observations on a given visit. So you can figure out how much time you want to devote to this and use that to figure out how many plants or animals that you want to observe. So if you want to spend 15 minutes and that's all you've got to devote to this on a particular visit, then you're going to look at maybe three or 4 plants. If they're right next to each other and you don't have to take any time walking from one to the next, that'll put you in about 15 minutes. If you want to spend more time on this, then go ahead and do more plants. You can always add additional plants in the future if you want to, and if you have the capacity to add more. So after you've picked your plants, you can select animal species. Here are just a variety of common animals that can be observed with Nature's Notebook. There are mammals like squirrels or deer, birds, reptiles, and amphibians are also on the list. They have insects like bees and butterflies on moths. But again, whatever you pick has to be on the species list with Nature's Notebook. So the data sheet and observation process is a little bit different for animals than it is for plants. With animals, you're looking in the whole observation area to see to find that animal or to see if you hear that animal species. And so it's kind of like a checklist. You say, yes, I saw this species, or no, I didn't. And then if you did see it, there are some additional questions that you can answer about what it was doing or what its activity was. And so here's an example, a list of the phenophases for American robin, which is pictured here to give you an idea of what type of things you're going to be looking at for, in this case, birds. So if you were to be observing this particular robin here in its nest, you would check, yes, I saw this species there. And then you would answer additionally that we see a robin sitting in its nest. We'd mark yes for live individuals, yes for occupied nest, and then we'd add a no or leave blank all of the other additional phenophases. So just to review here, give you a picture of how all of these different considerations come together. This is one of the observation sites that I observe at. It is my backyard. This is some years ago now. It is accessible. I go there all the time. It's very convenient. It's right out my back door. It's a representative area. It's definitely smaller than 15 acres. It has uniform conditions across the site. Another important consideration that I didn't mention previously, but I want to make sure I mention here now, is that you have to have permission to make observations there. If you're going to be observing on somebody else's property, just take a few minutes to go and approach the property owner and ask if it's all right for you to make observations. Often you will get that permission without any trouble at all. So in this case, this is my backyard. I have permission to be here. So I selected this location and I selected the plants that I did because they were ones that I was interested in. So this is my little orchard pocket. It has some spring bloomers and the orchard trees. And I picked those because I'm really interested in the data. I find it useful to know when my orchard trees are blooming or fruiting. That kind of thing is really helpful. And so that guided my selection of the plants. And there you go. That's one example. Your example, your site, and your choices can be whatever you want them to be. If you need additional help figuring out what to observe or where to observe, you can shoot me an email and I'm happy to walk you through that process. One final thing to note here, I mentioned it earlier, consider how far apart the plants are here. In this case, I don't have to walk very far to go from one plant to the next. In about 2 minutes, I could have circled all the way around this entire site. If you have a larger site and you have to walk farther between those individual plants and species, it's going to take you longer to make your observations. So once you've made all those choices, the next step is to put them in Nature's Notebook. So again, you can go to the website or you can register your site through the app. I'll talk you through the process for registering your site through the app. You go into the app, you log in, and then you are on this group section right here. You make sure you've selected, actually here, let me do this. Let me get a laser pointer. You make sure you have selected your personal sites, and you'll notice that there's the Indiana Backyard Observers group. With that, everybody is observing at their own personal sites, so there's no way to check that button, but it shows up to indicate that you are a member of that group. And then once you've made sure you are on the right site or right group, you click Go to Sites. And then that brings up your sites tab. So if you look along the top here, you see the groups, sites, plants and animals, observe and review. And then there's one other tab along there. So it essentially has these different tabs, and the choices that you make, the selections that you make on the left tab influence what shows up on the subsequent tabs. The same for the sites. What you select there shows what's on the plants and animals, dictates what shows up on the plants and animals tab. So you make sure you're on your personal sites, then you go to sites and you create a site. And that looks like this. You click the Add Plants and Animals button to add new plants and animals. You see several plants on this list already because I'm partway through the process of adding those plants and animals. When you first open this up and you are doing a new site, there will be nothing listed here. So you add those plants and animals. You do that individually. You put in the species name up here. You can have it show you either the common name or the scientific name. That's your choice. You can toggle between those two buttons. You pick a nickname. This can be whatever you want it to be. That's just for you so that you know which plant is which. And then you click Save and you add another plant. And then you just go back and forth between those until you've added all of your choices in there. You similarly, you do the same thing for animals. You can click that plants and animals button, put in your animal, pick its nickname, and click Save, and then you're good to go. You only have to do this part once. And when you finish that part that first time, you've created your site and registered it with Nature's Notebook, then you can skip over that step on all subsequent times. If you were to register your site through the web interface, it's the same type of process. Again, there they have similar tabs. There's the sites, the plants and animals, etc. And the choices you make on the left dictate what shows up on this column. So what you would do here is you would make sure that showing up here in this bar is your personal sites. Then you would click Add a New Site. You would enter in where that site is located and a few other questions. And then you would go over here and you would use the Add or Edit Plants or Add or Edit Animals selection, and then go through that same process where you put in the information that you did previously. So doesn't matter. Either way, there are just two options for how you can register your site. Once you've registered your site, you are good to go. And so we're going to move on now and talk about the details of observing and making observations. So you are going to be looking at the leafing, flowering, or fruiting of plants. You're going to be looking for the presence or absence of different animal species. You'll be asked a series of questions. You're going to answer those questions with a yes or a no, or you're unsure. And then you'll have the option to answer a follow-up question about the intensity of what you're seeing or the abundance of what you're seeing. And you'll repeat that. And you'll do this ideally once a week. You'll visit the selected plants and search for the animals and submit your data. The average observer makes it out maybe 3 times a month. That's okay. Any data is better than no data, so don't let that hold you back. Don't get too upset about that. We would love ideally 1 time a week. So here is what that data sheet looks like. This is exactly it. So this is for plants. This is a sample data sheet on the left. It asks you, do you see? And then it lists each of the items you're to look for. These are those phenophases that I was mentioning. Phenophases are just those observable stages in the annual life cycle of the plant or animal. They have a definable start and end point. They can last anywhere from a few days to a few weeks. And so you look at those, you answer the question, do you see breaking leaf buds, for instance? And you answer yes, no, or I'm not sure. That I'm not sure answer, that unsure option, is a totally acceptable option. I use that particularly at just the early stages when a phenophase might be starting and I'm not quite sure if it has officially started yet or not. And you can go back as you continue to observe and change that if you realize that the next week that you really were wrong and no, it's not happening. You can go back and change that question mark, that unsure, to a no, or the opposite. You can change it to a yes if you're like, yeah, I was right. It was actually starting and now I can see that it's really in full swing. You can also just leave it as an unsure because you might not be totally sure, and that is acceptable. I've been observing for many years now, and I still make use of that option. For the typical plant, there are 5 phenophases for leaves, 3 for flowers, and 3 for fruits. We're going to go into depth now on those phenophases because this is the core of what you're going to be observing, the core of the activity. And I want you to just have a really good understanding of what it is that you should be looking at. So it's really important to pay close attention to the definitions of each of these phenophases. No need to memorize them, but do make sure you read them carefully, that you're familiar with them. As you're observing, refer back to them as you go. When you're in the app, next to each, on the data sheet, next to each phenophase, there's a little I button. I'll show you this a little bit later, but if you click on that I button, that information button, it will show you the definition of the phenophase. So while you're in the process of making those observations, you can easily refer back to the definitions. So these are the phenophases for the leafing stage, the vegetative stage of the plants. And there are these 6 that we're going to go through. So the first one is breaking leaf buds. This is the definition right here. 1 or more breaking leaf buds are visible on the plant. A leaf bud is considered breaking once that green leaf tip is visible at the end of the bud, but before the first leaf from the bud has unfolded to expose the leaf stalk or the leaf base. So if we look at these 3 images right here, this one right here, we do not see a green leaf tip visible at the tip of the bud. So in this instance, we're looking at dormant buds. This is a no for breaking leaf buds. If we look at the second one right here, we can see part of that bud right there. We can see that green leaf tip extending out from it. So yes, we see that, but do we see the leaf stalk or the leaf base? Looking right there, I don't. So that puts us clearly in the breaking leaf bud stage, and that second image right there is a yes. Now, if we hop over to this last one, again, we see that green leaf tip, but we also see down here that leaf stalk. And so this one is just beyond the breaking leaf bud stage. And when we see this, that is a no for breaking leaf buds. Now, we answer this question looking at the entire plant. So if there is 1 leaf bud that's in the breaking leaf bud stage, we say yes. It says here 1 or more. So if you have a breaking leaf bud, or if you have a leaf bud and you look at it and you're like, oh, it's beyond it, but there's right next to it a leaf bud that is in the breaking leaf bud stage, you answer yes. You found 1, you're good to go. And that same thing goes for all of the other phenophases. 1 is enough for a yes. So the second phenophase is the leaf phenophase. This captures the entire period of time that live leaves are present on the plant, from the unfolding of that first leaf to the dropping or dying of the last leaf. This is the phenophase that you're going to say yes to for the very longest amount of time. And the definition is 1 or more live unfolded leaves are visible on the plant. A leaf is considered unfolded once its entire length has emerged from that breaking bud or the stem node or the growing stem tip, so that the leaf stalk or leaf base is visible at its point of attachment to the stem. And you don't include fully dried or dead leaves. So if we look at these 4 images here, every single one of these is a yes to the leaves phenophase. This very brand new leaf over here to this one that has seen better days and is on its way out. All of those are live unfolded leaves visible on the plant, and so a yes to this phenophase. The next one is the increasing leaf size phenophase. This is one that you're typically going to see only in the early spring. There may be other times when you will see this, but it is a majority of the leaves on the plant have not yet reached their full size and are still growing larger. Do not include the new leaves that continue to emerge at the ends of elongating stems throughout the growing season. So this one is one of those that is a little bit more challenging to answer. As you are getting started, you can skip a phenophase until you feel comfortable answering it. This one requires some context, like what does full-sized leaf look like? What is the majority? How can you tell how many? This one is challenging to answer, but it's also one that's typically going to be a short period of time in the early spring as those new leaves are coming out. The next one we're going to look at is the colored leaves phenophase. One or more leaves show some of their typical late season color, or yellow or brown due to drought or other stresses. Do not include small spots of color due to minor leaf damage or dieback on branches that have broken. Do not include fully dried or dead leaves that remain on the plant. So in each of these pictures, you see typical late season color. So you would report yes for each of these images for colored leaf phenophase. So you might be tempted to think that this is a phenophase that you're only going to see in the fall, that typical late season color. But that is not the case. You can see colored leaves at other points in time on the plant. And in fact, there are some species that are regularly dropping leaves and cycling them throughout the course of the growing season. There are some plants that are particularly stressed, and so they will be having colored leaves at various points in time. So this is one to keep your eye out even when you're not expecting it. And again, one or more leaves, one is enough to trigger a yes to this. If we go back a couple of slides, and if we look at this one right here, we can see on this that there are some spots of color and that there. These right there are not going to be colored leaves because some of that color is just due to, as it says here, minor leaf damage. So keep that in mind as you are looking at this. You're looking for a leaf that is colored. It's typical late season color, fully colored, not just a spot here or there. All right, so here are those phenophases again with those names of each of those phenophases matched up. There's one that we didn't talk about, and that was the initial growth phenophase. It is the equivalent of the breaking leaf buds stage for non-woody plants that die back down to the ground each season, or for annuals, where it is the first time you see some growth on it, and it's before those leaves are fully opened up. So depending on what particular species you're observing, you will get either breaking leaf buds or initial growth. The app will tell you which one you happen to be looking for, and you'll pay attention to the corresponding definition for whichever phenophase. So now let's look at the flowering and fruiting, the reproductive phenophases. 3 of these are listed here are related to flowering, and the other 3 are related to fruiting. So the first one, the flowers or flower buds phenophase, captures the entire period of flowering on the plant from the appearance of the first active bud to the wilting or drying of the last flower on the plant. So this is kind of the equivalent of the leaves phenophase. In this image here, you see both flower buds unopened, and then you see your opened flowers right there. And either one of those gives you a yes for this phenophase. This is flowers or flower buds. All right, this next phenophase captures the reproductive phase of the flower, and its definition is 1 or more open, fresh flowers are visible on the plant. Flowers are considered open when the reproductive parts are visible between or within the unfolded or open flower parts. Do not include wilted or dried flowers. So this one obviously overlaps with the flowers or flower buds phenophase, and that's okay. You answer each one of them independently, looking at the plant as a whole. If you see one or more of a flower bud or flower, you answer yes to that one. Here, if you see one or more open flowers, you answer yes to this. Now, in this case, if you do see an open flower, you're going to also want to make sure that you said yes to the flowers or flower buds phenophase. And then the last phenophases we're going to cover are the fruits phenophases. And for the fruits, they look very, very different on different species of plants. That's kind of one of those ways that you can tell the difference between one species to the next. So the definitions for these phenophases have some species-specific information. And so in this case that we're going to look at right here is the definition for tulip tree. And so one or more fruits are visible on the plant. For a tulip tree, the fruit is a winged seed, tightly grouped with many others in a cone shape that changes from green to tan or brown. Do not include empty cones that have already dropped all of their fruits. And then the ripe fruits phenophase is one or more ripe fruits are visible on the plant. For a tulip tree, a fruit is considered ripe when it has turned tan or brown. And again, don't include the empty cones that have already dropped all of their fruits. And in this image here, these are both fruits of tulip tree. On the left, we have a developing fruit, and on the right, we have a ripe fruits. You would say yes for either of these for the fruits phenophase. For this one, this is a no to the ripe fruits, and this one is a yes for the ripe fruits. And you can gather that information from those phenophase definitions. All right, so here are, just to sum up, all of those different flowering or fruiting phenophases. There's two additional ones here that we didn't go over. One is pollen release, and this is a phenophase that is only collected for species that are allergens. If you pick a tree that's an allergen or a plant that's an allergen, read that phenophase definition and answer that question, but it has to do with when it is releasing pollen, because that pollen is the particular part of the plant that is what we respond to with our allergies. And then the other one is recent fruit or seed drop, and this one is fairly self-explanatory. It has to do with the removal of the seeds or the fruits from the tree. So let's briefly give it a try, practice here with Eastern redbud. So to help you understand what you're looking at, these are the flowers of the plant. This is what our fruits look like. This right here, those are ripe, they're dried pods. And then these are what our fall colored leaves look like. They're lovely heart shape here. So let's look at this image right here. This lovely Eastern redbud. This is from, I believe, Holiday Park a couple of years ago in the fall. So let's just walk through this here together. Do we see breaking leaf buds? Do we see any buds with that green leaf tip that are not fully opened and don't have their stems visible? All right, what about leaves? Do we see leaves on this tree? Increasing leaf size. Are the leaves, the majority of the leaves, not yet their full size? Or are they still growing? Do we see colored leaves? And falling leaves and on down through the list. I'll give you a moment to go ahead and see if you can answer all of those questions. So how did you do? Here are the answers. No, we don't see breaking leaf buds, but yes, we see lots of leaves. These are all mature full-size leaves. We're into the fall in this particular picture, and so we do not see increasing leaf size. If you look right in here in this area and up there, you can see some colored leaves. We can't tell around the bottom of the plant to see if we have any falling leaves. So we're just going to answer no to that. We could also have answered a question mark or left that one blank. We do see flowers or flower buds right here, but none of them are open. So it is a no to open flowers. And we don't see any pollen release, but we do see a fruit. If you look right here in the front, in the foreground, there's one of those pods, and then there's another one right back there. And they're nice and brown, so those are ripe fruits. And again, we don't see any recent fruit or seed drop or evidence of that in the particular picture that we've got there, but there could be down below the picture, so we're going to put a question mark. So that's it. That is the process. That is it. We went and made an observation. We collected data for this eastern redbud for what we saw there, and that is what you would do as a backyard observer for each of the species that you select, the individual plants, and similarly for the animals that you select. It's a pretty quick and easy process. It's something that is totally doable and doesn't take too long. All right, I would like to quickly walk you through how to use Nature's Notebook, just some details about the app and the web interface. I will share these slides with you so you can refer back to them later on. I feel like this is hard information to share because it's not really particularly interesting to sit and listen to, but I'd like to go over it so that you can have in your mind, in your back of your mind, that you have seen these things before, and when you need to know them, you can refer back to this and get the information that you need. All right, so quickly using the app again, you log in through the app right there. You put in your username or email and your password. The first time you'll have to grant access to the app, to your Nature's Notebook account. You just have to click grant access and do that once. Once you're in the app, you click the join the group button. You search for us to join the group. You can be a participant of many different groups, and if you do, every group that you've joined will be listed there. Using the navigation menu along the top, there's the groups, sites, plants and animals, observe and review tabs. We'll look at each of them pretty quickly. Your first one right here, my sites, or sometimes it's called personal sites. Those are the ones that you're the only one observing at. Other sites are group sites, which means that many people can observe there. All the sites you're going to be creating yourself are going to be personal sites. So you select your personal sites, and then that'll take you to the sites tab. This person has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 personal sites, depending on which site you want to observe at a given time. You click on that one, and then you would go to the plants and animals tab. Here's that tab. It just shows you all of the plants and animals that you have set up in there. You can add additional ones, or you can just go straight to the Observe tab, which brings up the data sheet right here. So it's got the phenophases. It's got those questions along there. It's got this little eye that is the button that you can click on to see the phenophase definition. I believe on this screen, I've got that right here. That's what that'll look like right there. It also shows you that optional question that I mentioned. So in the case of young leaves for this particular plant, the phenophase or the optional question is how many young leaves are present? And it gives you a big range, less than 3, 3 to 10, 11 to 100, 101 to 1,000, 101 to 10,000, more than 10,000. So big ranges. And all of those abundance intensity questions are similarly big bins like that. All right, so you would record your observations for whatever species happens to be listed on here. This is a drop-down menu, so you can go through and select which one you want to start on. You can order your species, so the first one you come to is the first one that'll show up on your list, and then when you click Next Plant, the next one you come to will show up on that list, or you can navigate through that list by clicking on this drop-down menu and picking the particular species you want to observe at. You can use this button right here to mark all phenophases as no. This can be handy At certain points in the year when most of what you're going to be answering is going to be a no, you can click that. It'll put a no in all of them. And then you can just click on the ones that you want to change to a different answer. So in this case, this person has clicked on no, yes, no, 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 and no. And once you've answered all of those questions, you click on next plant to go to the next one. You can also click on save data and then go to the next plant. If you make changes, you'll want to make sure you click save data afterward. Okay, so back up at the top right here, this is again different tabs that you can click on. So right now we're on the plants tab. There's also an animals tab. So after you finished answering the questions, entering data for all of your plants, you click on the animals tab and you enter all of your data for your animals. And then there's also this third one that's just site visit details. And if we look at that one, you'll see that it's highlighted, it's blue, meaning that's our active tab, and it has details related to the site as a whole, how long you spent observing, whether there was snow on the ground, whether there was snow in the treetops. Some of this information is utilized by scientists studying the data. It can be helpful to have that in there. You enter it once and it applies to all of your observations as a whole for that particular given day. And then moving along the top here, we're now on the review tab. This one gives you a green check mark when you've answered all of the questions. It gives you kind of a grade box so that you know you made some observations on a day when you haven't hit all of the observations. So this can just help you know if you've answered everything and be a check. If you want to go back and change your observations after the fact, you would go to the review tab. You'd click on the particular day of observations that you want, and then you pick what species, and it'll take you back to that data sheet. You can change it, save the data, and then your changes have been made. And then the last tab is the settings tab. It has a couple of settings here. Sync over Wi-Fi only, include the time and date in your observations, and you can also change which person's account is using the app if you're using a shared device. So that was a quick run through of where all things are located on that app. It's pretty quick and easy. If you have any trouble with the app, let me know. Let Nature's Notebook know. They're pretty responsive about fixing changes and bugs in their app. All right, let's briefly run through the web interface here. Just so you know where things are and what it looks like. On the Nature's Notebook website, there is this button that says your observation deck. That's where you go to log in and do all of your work on Nature's Notebook. This is what your observation deck looks like. It has a bunch of different tabs along here. Observations is where you will do most of the observation work, but there's also a learning tab that has some resources and some courses that you can take to help you be a better observer. It has data visualization tools right here and some other things that you can explore at your leisure. Relatedly, it has different tabs along here like it does on the app. Up at the top over here, this is where you go to your account. This is where you go to log out. We already talked about that. So here's the first one where you pick which site you want to observe on. You can also edit your site there or add a new site. This is the tab where you would go to add new plants or animals. And if you do want to change the order, you can't do this in the app. You can only do this on the website. If you want to change the order that your plants and animals show up in, you would click on this sort animals and plants button, and then you can change that order so that they show up in the most convenient order for you as you're out making observations. On this tab right here, if you click on print field data sheets, that'll give you a couple of different options for data sheets that you can print out and then use in the field. And then you would come back and you would go to this final one right here to enter your observations. this is what that intra-observations page looks like. I like the app. It's a lot cleaner and smoother and easier. But essentially, you have all the same information that you're putting in here. You have these little arrows that expand or close different options. So right now, the Forsythia option is expanded, so you can see all of the phenophase questions. You click on those buttons, on those letters to enter your data. You can enter the additional optional answers there, and you can do several days at a time. So this is October 16th. You could enter data for another date here and another date there. And then there's this button right here to enter more data, which will give you additional data sheets that pop up over there. You need to make sure you put in your date up here, and that'll apply to all of the species down there. And you can click on whichever species you want, expand it, and enter that data along there. And then when you're done, make sure you click Submit Data. And then there again is that More Data option. All right, just a final few notes here before we go into some questions. We talked a lot about Nature's Notebook. There's the second citizen science platform that we use called iNaturalist. iNaturalist is designed for sharing photographic evidence of biodiversity. You don't have to know the name of what you're observing with iNaturalist. They have an active online community that collaboratively helps ID observations. They do a better job of that when you take better pictures, but it's a really great way to improve your ID abilities by putting things on, looking at what the identification that other people or the app itself offers. iNaturalist is a lot of fun. It's different from Nature's Notebook in two big ways. It's based on sharing photographs of what you see, and then two, because it's focused on biodiversity, so you don't have to make the repeated visits to the same location. It's also really simple and easy to use. We regularly offer training sessions on iNaturalist. There will be another training session for iNaturalist a little bit later. You can also find last year's iNaturalist training, a video of it online, and we'll share links to that through our social media later on. If you'd like to join us, if you're interested in iNaturalist training, you can also email me and I'll let you know when those are going to come up as they're scheduled. And then also right now, coming up on April 26th through the 29th is the annual City Nature Challenge. For the 7th year, Indiana Sciences and a coalition of partners, including Indiana Phenology, are challenging Indiana residents to connect with urban wildlife and be citizen scientists and participate in the Global City Nature Challenge. Like I said, it goes April 26th through 29th. And all you have to do is go out, use iNaturalist, and observe and submit pictures of plants and wildlife using the free app. And it's kind of a friendly competition to see which community can make the most observations and which community has the most biodiversity. In Indiana, the Bloomington area, Evansville area, Fort Wayne area, Indianapolis area, Lafayette area, Michiana, and Terre Haute all are areas that are participating in the City Nature Challenge. Or if you're not in one of those areas, you can just make observations and participate for Indiana. So if you are interested in iNaturalist and want some motivation to go out and try it, between April 26th and April 29th is a great time to get started, because the observations you submit will become part of that project and will be included in our numbers. Okay, an invitation. I hope that you are going to join us as backyard observers. You can also volunteer to observe at some of our Indiana Phenology Trail observation sites. The best way to do that is to reach out to me or reach out to one of the sites along our Phenology Trail and hook up with the site manager, and they can help you begin observations and give you all the information you need to know to make observations of those different sites. And if you happen to know a school or a teacher who you think would be interested in our schoolyard phenology program, which is a free program, by the way, feel free to send them our way. Last notes here. This is a great activity to do as a group. Bring a buddy. If you are a grandparent, bring your grandchildren. If you've got a good friend, bring them along. Coworkers, anyone. This is a great activity to do as a group. We would love it if you would share your great photos of phenophases as you're going along. I have one observer who likes to send me pictures of things that they are not sure about, and it is great because they take very close-up pictures of the phenophase, and then we can talk through it and be like, yep, this is what you're seeing, and then we can then use their photographs to create educational resources and additional material for helping other observers understand what it is that they're seeing as well. Along those lines, here is one of those resources that we've created using those photos of different phenophases. This is what we call a phenophase photo guide. We have these for more than 50 different species right now. We're additionally creating more of these. They show a picture of what each of those phenophases looks like so that you've got a reference as you are out observing. You can find these on our website on our Learn tab. If you don't see something on our website that you'd really like to see, just send us an email, info@indianaphenology.org. We'll get to me and we will see how we can help you. And a final helpful tip, put your observations on your calendar. Do it the same day. I like to go out on Thursdays to one of the trail sites that I observe, and then I make observations on Sundays in my own yard. If you put it on your calendar, it's a lot more likely to go ahead and actually happen. And with that, I have finished with the content. And I would like to open it up for questions. Is there anything that you would like me to talk more about, or anything that I didn't cover? Feel free to unmute yourself and we will go through that. Last chance here. Any questions? All right, sounds good. No questions right now, but you might have questions as you get started. And for that, definitely reach out, info@indianaphenology.org. We will answer your question. I'd definitely like to help brand new observers through that initial setup stage and answering questions. There's no stupid question. You'll never get to the point where you're asking too many questions. Anything and everything is fair game. And thank you so much for joining me tonight for this spring observer training. And I will reach out with the slides, a PDF of the slides for you for your reference as you go ahead and get started. And definitely reach out if you have any questions. Thank you.